Today I want to speak a little bit about Mr. Narcissist in relationships. And again, we don't use a judgmental attitude when we talk about narcissism or any other subject, but rather it's useful to understand some of the dynamics that can crop up in relationships with those who have very narcissistic tendencies or those who have NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder. So today I want to give you some tips really as far as the types of dynamics that may pop up with Mr. Narcissist. And when we are first engaged in a relationship with a very narcissistic person or someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, the beginning of the situation is often a very lovely period where we are built up, apparently, and admired greatly and treated in a way which possibly we haven't been treated before by other people. And Mr. Narcissist often crops up with a very nice demeanour and very friendly, outgoing, charming, and very, very appreciative of you and your good points. So he's very admirable of your gifts and abilities, the way you look. He seems to be very, very appreciative. And in fact, the beginning of the dynamic could be said to be perfect as far as a romantic involvement is concerned. And this is where many people get pulled up short, is that they can get carried away on the romantic high, which is the beginning of a narcissistic type relationship, and then feel as if they are all at sea, as you were, because when the switch occurs, which sometimes occurs quite early on, sometimes it can take a little while, generally within months, sometimes it can be longer, and the switch then may occur after a commitment. But generally, you see the change and the mask fall when the narcissistic person is met with some type of confrontation, or they may believe that you are not coming up to expectations that they have, because very narcissistic people have very high expectations as far as what they deserve and as far as what other people deserve or don't, as the case may be. So in the beginning, because we have this very strong drawing in process where we are being groomed really as far as the narcissistic dynamic is concerned, it can be a period when we're drawn into a false sense of security as far as this person is concerned. And when we look back on the situation in retrospect, it can seem quite obvious as to what was happening. But when we're actually in that dynamic and our ego is being drawn in and catered to, and we're enjoying the lovely romantic feel of everything apparently being perfect, and that we are truly admired by this person, it can be very much of a shock when we're sort of thrown, as it were, when the switch occurs, and the types of behaviour that we're then seeing, which is the real persona coming forward, is completely the opposite. And we are met with the demeaning and the criticism, and as we move towards being the discarded one, if you will, which is spoken about so much. But the reason that the discard happens often is to do with the switch in perception that the narcissistic person has of us in terms of us not coming up to their expectations as far as what we are giving them is concerned. But as long as we were to continue giving them this vast amount of admiration, where we do not criticize or confront them in any way regarding their behavior, even though we should, everything then tends to go along swimmingly. But when something occurs and the narcissist is given the impression that we're not going to come up to scratch and we're not going to keep giving them all this lovely stuff and serving their needs without asking for anything in return, this is often when we get the switch, which is spoken about so much, is when they realize or they believe that we're not going to be giving them all this lovely stuff without asking for anything in return, which is their ideal situation. So it's their perception of us that changes then. And it's not really anything to do with us as far as that being put into the relationship bin, as I refer to it. It's really about the narcissistic person's opinion or view of us that has changed, because we haven't been able to continue to keep pouring all this stuff onto them and not asking anything for something in return ourselves. So often, because the narcissist's perception of the partner is based solely, if you will, to a great extent, on how much that person can give them. And it's not based on a two-way dynamic. It's very much a one-way dynamic. This is where we get the change occurring. And because there are many, many people out there who will be drawn back in with the charm and the facade, it doesn't take very much generally for the narcissistic person to go and find someone else who is appropriate as they see it. But it doesn't mean to say that that other situation or relationship is going to work for them either, because they have over-idealistic expectations of what another person is and who that woman needs to be. And they base that on very, very perfectionist standards and their own expectations and needs as well, which are very great as far as the narcissist is concerned. Even though they may not come over as being very needy, they do have an enormous amount of needs, and they expect those to be met by the ideal partner who is, in their view, not going to ask for anything in return. So in other words, they like to set things up in a way where their needs are met primarily and that they are not expected to give anything in return. And those dynamics are set up quite early on. And sometimes with covert narcissists, they will do nothing at all except to withdraw very, very quickly early on, so that the partner is groomed to only give, and they are groomed to only think about the narcissist's needs and not their own. So over time the partner becomes very drained and they become very disempowered because they are groomed to not consider their own needs and not to stand up for their needs assertively, because they have a sense that if they do that, then they're going to not get their needs met anyway and could potentially be thrown into the relationship bin anyway. So when the mask does come off, which as I say could be anywhere really along the dynamic, the partner then is met with criticism and they are slowly downgraded in order really to get them to change their behaviour. So if the partner will change their behaviour and go back to giving loads and loads of attention and not criticising, not asking for any of their needs to be met, but only falling in line with the narcissist's agenda, then they may be put back on the pedestal again as a reward for their good behaviour, as it were. So they may be a little bit confused by that, but over time, of course, that conditioning shows them what they need to be doing in order to be kept in the number one spot, as it were. But even though the partner may be given the number one position, the narcissist, because of their sense of entitlement, will still feel that they want to have others, other partners, other forms of attention, and therefore feel as if it's their due, really, to be able to go and have other partners on the side, which the partner may or may not be aware of, depending on how consciously aware the partner is, and really as far as what decision the partner makes as well. But regardless of what decision the partner will make, there will generally be other partners being brought in anyway, regardless of whether the partner stays or not. So the relationship follows quite a clear format, if you will. And as far as what happens with the relationship, it depends, as far as the partner is concerned, very much on what the partner does and their position in the relationship. So, for instance, if a partner decides that, look, this is just not fulfilling my needs, I'm getting drained here, and all I'm doing is building this person's ego up, and there's nothing very much in this situation for me. So if they decide then to leave, of course, as far as the partner is concerned, they're able to go on and to find a healthy situation then, hopefully, potentially. But if they decide to stay, they may be drawn deeper into the dynamic through rewards and punishments. And so they may be brought into a position where over time they become more disempowered. And if they are very needy because of the dynamic that's been set up, they may stay and continue to feed the situation and the narcissist over a very, very long period of time, because they are rewarded intermittently. So when you've got intermittent reinforcement, it's very confusing for the partner, because they're living with someone who is Mr. Nice Guy one minute and apparently seems very appreciative, and then they're reverting to their normal self and apparently are becoming someone else. But they're not becoming someone else. They're reverting back to their normal self. And the Mr. Nice Guy that is perceived is to do with the intermittent reinforcement very often. And so the partner is kept on a swing or a roundabout of confusion, where they're kept in the relationship potentially because of intermittent reinforcement and because of their own confusion and disempowerment. So today I just wanted to highlight, as far as the actual relationship dynamic is concerned with a narcissist or a narcissistic person is concerned, it's quite a good idea to have a very strong sense of self and very strong ability to know what we want in a relationship, and to be able to perceive actually what is going on, to be able to identify if this is a narcissistic dynamic that's being set up. And then we can decide to make the decision as far as our own welfare is concerned, and to either stay in the relationship and to deal with the dynamic as it is, or to leave.